Hello! Today we are going to be making a shirt dress with a few modifications of my choice. I will be adding puff sleeves, pin tucks, and that's it really. Everything else is on the pattern, so there's not that much difference. Geez, Cassie. I will take you through the process of making this dress. I will link the pattern that I used in the description, and I hope you enjoy. Let's go! Here are all my kind of bodice pieces, plus collar and pockets. There's quite a few elements to this dress. Here I'm showing you the two front skirt pieces and then the two back skirt pieces. I just want to show you the adjustments I did on the front bodice. So this is what it looks like, and I've gone ahead and traced that and manipulated it a little bit, and I'll show you here. Added about 6 pin tucks that I want to put onto the front bodice pieces. So I have a 1/2 centimeter gap in between each pin tuck, and then each pin tuck I want to be 1/2 centimeter as well, so I had to double that and make it 1 centimeter, so when I fold it in half and sew it, it'll add up to 1 centimeter. So this is what it looks like. I've just taped and inserted 1 centimeter for each pin tuck. Here's the back side of it. As you can see, I've put a piece of interfacing for when I fold over an iron for the button closure. That's just a side note. Going on the right side, I have marked all the lines where I want a pin tuck, so that's how it's looking. I've also switched out the sleeve of this pattern for a small puff sleeve, which is this one here, and it's from this pattern, the style 4030, and I'm going to be using these little puff sleeves. And I made this dress, that one, in a previous video, my maple autumn dress. If you want to see, I will link it. Alright, so here I've sewn all the pin tucks onto one side, and I think it looks quite good. I think this one, the middle one, came out a bit wide, but overall I think it looks quite nice. I'm going to take you through how to do it on the other side. So here I am folding on one of the lines that I drew onto the bodice front, and I'm just going to press that down to make sure it's nice and accurate and crisp. I am sewing a 1/2 centimeter strip, going back to the iron and pressing that out, and then pressing it to the center front, and that creates our first little pin tuck. I'm just doing the same for the rest of the horizontal lines. So here's the pin tucks on the left and right front bodice. For the center front, I am folding it in about 1/2 centimeter or so, and then folding in again on the fold line of the pattern. And then I will be edge stitching along this edge, being careful not to stitch on top of the first pin tuck that we did. So when I'm sewing, I will be like moving that across and making sure I am sewing in this little ditch here, and then you probably can't even see the stitching once it's all lying down. Edge stitching that down. Here I've gone ahead and started pinning my darts on my front bodice pieces. There's 2 on each, one at the waist and one at the bust. And how I normally sew darts is I backstitch at the base, and then I stitch all the way up to the point where I need to taper off, and I don't backstitch here, I just hand knot it in place. So this is the front bodice pieces all finished in preparation for sewing, and I've pressed all my darts down and outwards. I'm just bringing through the back bodice. I have done the 2 darts indicated on the back bodice and press those towards the center. Next stage is to attach the yoke to the back piece. So I've got the outer yoke piece, putting that right sides together and sewing along that curve. Once that's sewn, I'll turn it around to the wrong side, get my back yoke piece with the interfacing on, and put the right side of that down on the wrong side of the back piece. And I'm sewing that again, following the first line of stitching that we did. Okay, now I've flipped it up. I tried to press out these bits, but I can't quite do it, so I'm going to try it a bit later. But for now, the seam is pressing upwards, so I am going to top stitch here to stabilize that. Let me just show you in the middle, so it's going upwards. Here I am pinning these shoulder seams right sides together, but only to the outer yoke piece. I'm leaving the inner yoke piece unstitched for now. Once that's sewn, basically just roll the entire bodice to the shoulder seams and then kind of like sandwich it all between the front and back yoke. We want to sew that line of stitching that we just did. We want to sew that to the back yoke now with right sides together. So just pinning that in place, and we'll do a line of stitching again. And then we just want to take all of that fabric we rolled into that burrito out. And there we have it. We should have our yoke attached to our bodice. Here I'm just top stitching to neaten that up a little bit. Just sewing the side seams of the bodice right sides together. As usual, I am finishing off each seam by pressing it open and overlocking each side of the seam. Moving on to the sleeves, I am basting 2 lines of stitching on my machine at the top of the sleeves, where indicated from the pattern. Sewing up the side seams of the sleeve, right sides together. Now I've folded about ½ centimeter and then folded again. To create this channel, I'm going to top stitch that, leaving an opening to feed elastic through. That's the size of my upper arm, so it will gather it. So here I'm feeding the elastic in the channel that we stitched at the bottom of the sleeve. Hand sewed the 2 pieces of elastic together really strongly and firmly, tucking that back into that channel, distributing the gathers, and then sewing a line to close up that channel. I've gone ahead and pinned my sleeve into my armhole, and I like to tack this in place as well because I find it much easier and I don't make much mistakes when I do it this way. Here I am placing the 2 front skirt pieces right sides together and sewing down this seam and up to a point marked on the pattern actually. So sewing that seam down, I actually had to unpick the top of that seam because I needed to, put it in the placket. So I would probably put the placket in first and then sew up the seam. I'm putting it right sides together on the left front skirt piece, stitching that 1/2 centimeter down the length and then 1.5 centimeters, like my usual seam allowance at the bottom. Then I'm turning it out and then pressing the seam allowance to that newly sewn placket piece that we just did, and I'm gonna understitch that so the seam sits on that piece. The placket attached. Next, I just want to press that seam open and then press this area as well at the top, reflecting the placket that we just made. I've gone ahead and overlocked all the raw edges as well on the placket too, and the opposite side. Next, I've marked out a stitch line to hold that pressed area we made, so I'm just going to stitch a line to keep that in place. Here I've jumped ahead and overlocked my pocket pieces and pinned it to the markings on the front skirt pieces and the back skirt pieces. I've pressed it out now, outwards, and I am just top stitching that down. Put 2 lines of basting for gathering at the top of the skirt pieces. So here's a little revision on what we've done. There's the pockets. 2 lines of basting stitches to gather into the bodice, and then there's the other skirt. For the front skirt piece, I've done the basting and then stopped here and then started again on the other side. I'm putting right sides together, the front and back skirt pieces, sewing the seam and then around the pocket as well at my normal seam allowance. Moving back to the bodice, I have pinned and tacked the outer waistband to the right side of the bodice, and at the same time on the wrong side of the bodice I've also pinned the inner waistband with the interfacing at the same time, so I've tacked them together, and we're going to do 1 single row of stitching to attach them both, so when we fold them out it'll sort of sandwich that seam and make it look really nice from both sides. I've gone ahead and gathered my skirt into the bodice, matching up the side seams of the skirt to the side seams of the bodice, evenly distributing the gathers and then pinning and tacking. I always tack when we've got gathers, and I've only pinned the skirt to the outer waistband piece, the one that doesn't have the interfacing. I can just fold that inner waistband piece down and hand sew that to that seam, making it nice and neat on the inside and the outside. Putting the 2 top pieces of the collar, sewing down the sides and then around the top, leaving the neckline open for now. Taking that, I've trimmed all the seam allowance and graded it, turning it out, pressing that and top stitching in. So we have these 3 color pieces at this point. I've turned over this top edge by 1.5 centimeters, and this will be the back, and then this one's the front. I will be putting this one on this side, matching the middle sections, and I'm gonna baste this in place, and then once this is based, I will flip it over and attach this one and baste that again. And then after we've done that, sandwiching that collar piece, well, let's finish stitch here, so we're going to stitch all the way across here and up at there, so then we can pull it out and then attach this side, which has the seam allowance, to the neckline, and then use this side to encase all the little edges by hand sewing. That's how I do it. So yeah. Here's the collar turned out, and we're going to be sewing with that piece that we didn't turn under to the neckline. So I've pinned that to the neckline here using a lot of pins. When we turn it up, it should look like this. Folding that over the seam allowance to make it lovely and neat, and hand sewing that in place to the seam. Roll hemming the bottom of the dress. I didn't show the process of making buttonholes and sewing on the buttons. I just used my buttonhole foot and the markings from the pattern to place and stitch all of those down. So how does it look? I really like how this one turned out. I think it's really wearable. I love the color, I love the shape. It makes me feel really put together. I made it out of a bedsheet and it's just so comfy. Yeah, it's just lovely. I hope you enjoyed watching me make this dress. I hope to see you soon, and take care. Bye.